Joining us today on the How Did You podcast is Matt, a senior video journalist from the Daily Mirror.
Could you take us through how your journey began and what you would actually studying at University of Leicester and what kind of made you stand up for everybody else?
Well, I originally decided to go to the University of Leicester because I was chasing a woman. It wasn't based on anything to do with academic credentials or pedigree. I was trying desperately to get together with someone. I failed spectacularly, so I thought I'd make the best of a bad situation. I ricocheted around a few different courses, deciding what I wanted to do, and I settled on media and communications. As it was then, media and society, it had a very different name. It's been rebranded several times since. And the first term started off very, very well. But what I was unaware of was over the summer, there was a rumor that was going around on the Guardian education website that the course was going to be closed down, and the university reassured people this wasn't the case. And actually, it turned out they were planning something, and it was revealed around, as memory serves, it was revealed around November, December time. And I remember very, very vividly, we had a very big meeting amongst all of our year with the heads of department. And I walked out of the meeting saying quite loudly, well, there goes my degree. I'm going to have to do something about this. And I got onto the phone to my dad, who used to be a union rep when he was in London, and I picked his brains about what to do, and it just snowballed from there, really.
Obviously, at university, there's a lot you can do. What kind of societies and things like that did you get involved with?
To begin with, none. I was more interested with looking around the city. So in my first year, I pretty much avoided freshers. I wanted to understand what there was to do, see around Leicester, and I didn't really connect with freshers. And looking back, I think I made a mistake there. But I ended up having to sit my first year again. So in the grand scheme of things, it actually worked out quite well. And out of that protest group that formed over our course, I was approached by someone on my degree to run to be the controller of the student radio station. I had no interest in it. Radio is not my forte, never has been. But I thought, you know what? I think it'll be a laugh. So I ran for it, but the elections were running at the same time as the meetings with the university were going on with regards to my course. And I was causing trouble there. And I lost the election because of the work I was doing with regards to meeting with the university and course leaders to try and find out what on earth was going on. And it sort of fell apart. I didn't really regret it. I didn't really miss much. But at the time, we had an old forum with the Students' Union. And I saw on the forum that there was a German lad called Martin was asking for someone to take over student television at the university. And he wrote this very weird post just asking for someone to take it up. Now, obviously, anyone familiar with student groups, it's always about elections. You're being elected by your peers. It's democratically driven. This wasn't, which intrigued me. And I started talking to him and said, look, I'm studying media. This interests me. Tell me more about what you're doing. And I remember going to meet him in the old, it was like a cafe in the Students' Union building at the time. And we were late because my girlfriend at the time had dropped a metal object on her toe. So we had to go to A&E. She was an engineering student at the university, and it was something she'd done for a course. And so I was very mindful, I'm keeping this man waiting. And I met up with him, and there was someone else there as well. His name was Josh. And he was interested too. And not to denigrate him, he didn't appear to be the smartest person in the room. So I thought, all right, there's no competition here. So he was very smiley and happy, but I just laid out what my grand scheme was. I wanted screens in the Student Union building. I had no idea I was going to achieve it. I wanted content to be made. I wanted to film nights out. I laid out this really big plan. And Martin said this very weird anecdotal quote to me, which was, "We have a saying in Germany, a new broom sweeps best." Still baffles me to this day. And that was pretty much it. He said, "I think you'll be the best person for the job." I brought Josh on as my number 2, and we kind of started from there. Josh didn't last very long, if you're wondering. He didn't really have the drive for it, but I really got into it and started teaching myself how to edit, how to film, how to shoot, how to negotiate funding. And that first year for student TV in Leicester was a roller coaster. We got a hell of a lot done, and we covered an awful lot of ground in a very short space of time. And we had a lot of doubters. A lot of people didn't think it would last, and that only drove us to want to do more, to achieve more, and to prove that we could do a hell of a lot more. Yeah, looking back on it, it was quite an exciting time. People don't realise the opportunities that I always said we started student TV because it had already existed previously in the early 80s, but it was a very different creature. It was a very different beast. So in many ways, we were carrying on the name, but we were starting from scratch. And it was a lot of fun. It was really was a lot of fun, and led to my work with the National Student TV Association.
So obviously we know now you're a bit of a troublemaker.
Fair comment.
Yeah, we want to know, how did you do within your degree?
Terribly. I spent far too much time on other things, barring my degree. I've said it before, and I'll say it again. I actually spelt the name of my degree wrong on the cover of my dissertation. That's how badly I ended up finishing my course. Pro tip, do not take Red Bull coffee chasers to get through an evening to write a dissertation. It ended very, very badly, and I thought I could see through time for a short while. I kind of feel academically I let myself down. I came out with a 2-2. But I know I could have done more. And going back to academia feels like unfinished business for me, because as much as I owe my time at university a great deal, and I really do, academically, there's more I could have done and there's more I should have done, and I didn't. I was and remain a smart ass, and I blagged and I conned my way through a lot when really I shouldn't have done. I should have just got my head down, worked hard. But I always felt I could find an excuse. I could get away around things. I could make my case. I could stand up for myself. And in some ways, that was a very good way to cut my teeth and to learn. But in other ways, as I said, academically, I really came out of university with a lot less than what I really should have done.
My favourite story, Matt, that you've always told me is your kind of TV society role that was taken off of you. Would you be happy enough to tell us how you got it back?
Oh yeah, fine. As you have within student unions, they have meetings, and meetings have consequences for attendance. And we had a media committee meeting which covered student media within the building, within the students' union. And I wasn't attending them because they weren't achieving much. I didn't like the people there. They knew I didn't like them. And I thought I'd rather spend my time more productively in the student union bar in the Redfern than listening to people waffle about the same nonsense that isn't going to affect anything in the grand scheme of things. So I just didn't turn up. Now, the issue there is you don't turn up for 3 consecutive meetings, the students' union decides that you have vacated your post and they sack you. They sack you from your role. Now, I knew this was coming, so I wrote within our group's constitution certain key roles. So I developed a role which I borrowed from politics, from the UK government, of the director without portfolio. In government, they have the minister without portfolio, who moves around different departments and can undertake work that the government, the Prime Minister, requires of them. So I thought, all right, I'm going to create a director without portfolio. If we ever need the role, we've got it there. Now, we were going into the meeting where I knew I was going to be sacked, and the Students' Union was going to make a very public show of it. And I don't like being one-upped. So I spoke to my number 2, Barry, and said, right, we're going into this meeting. You're going to be made acting head of Student TV. When they sack me, I want you to publicly tell them your first role as the head of Student TV will be to appoint me as director without portfolio, and then give that role the acting role of head of Student TV in the interim until my period of office would have originally finished. And he did that publicly. And the Student Union, the SABs, made this big show of, well, now that minutes have been discussed, we're going to have to remove X, Y, and Z from their office, which included me. And then Barry put his hand up dutifully, read out the script that I gave him, and I'm sat in the corner of the lecture theatre where we had the council meeting, just there with a big smug grin on my face because I'd outplayed them again. That's essentially what I did, and it was all by the rules. And they couldn't do a damn thing about it because they agreed those rules 6 months previously. So the union had already set themselves up for me to be able to go around them on a 360.
That is very well played. That is very clever. What we want to know is, how did you get into your job at the Daily Mirror?
LinkedIn. So I was on LinkedIn, just browsing, looking at job apps, looking at some industry bits and pieces, and someone, a very good friend of mine who was an intern when I worked at the Evening Standard and the Independent, he had moved to the Mirror, and he shared a job advertisement, and he just said, if anyone fancies working on my team, we're hiring, get in touch. So I just sent him a direct message and said, hello mate, can you tell me a bit more about the Mirror? I think I might have a punt at this. And we had a bit of a back and forth, and he said, look, it's not like the job we used to do on the Standard in the Indie. It's a bit more clip driven. It's a bit more hard news driven. But if you want me to give your details to our boss, I'm more than happy to. Yeah, go ahead. I'd love to have a chat with him. I was expecting on these things, you normally get someone will come back to you in maybe like a couple of hours or a day. You don't expect it to be fairly immediate, but he did get back to me in just under like half an hour. His boss got in touch with me and said, can we have a chat? We spoke over the phone. He then called me in, I think it was like a couple of days after, and said, look, let's have a chat. What's your experience? And I told him what my previous roles had been. And he asked me how I felt about the job. And I said, I think I'd really enjoy it. And he put me on the spot. He asked me, there were 2 roles going, one which was a junior role, one which was a senior role. So I just went, I'll take the senior role if it's going. And he told me, look, we're still going to advertise, we've still got to talk to people, but we'll get back to you. And I waited and I waited. And it was just, we're coming through August, and I was interviewing for another role internationally, teaching in China. And I thought, my career is going to go one of 2 ways. I'm either going to go back into education and go over to China to teach English and media, or I'm going to have one final roll at the dice and see where this interview with the Mirror ends up. And I'd heard nothing. The bank holiday had gone. I'd had my final interview for the role in Shenzhen. And they got back to me and said, Matt, can you come in for a second interview? I'm like, yeah, great. Came in for it. And I wasn't sure how it went. The read of it, normally in these things, you get a very strong read about how it works. I didn't know what to think. Then a couple of days later, I got the call. It was from our HR team, and they offered me the job, and that was that.
So you mentioned the Evening Standard. What was your career path like when you came out of uni?
Confused would be the headline there. When I came out of university, I was originally working as a barman. I was working in the halls of residence bars, but because of issues funding accommodation in Leicester, I went back home. And having been brought up by my grandmother, I went back home and attempted to be a carer for my grandmother. It didn't end well. It was too much. The mental health issues that caused for me, it's a really big struggle, and I have nothing but respect for people that undertake it and do a much better job than I managed. It was incredibly difficult. Coming out of that, again, I was trying to do agency work, but we're under a carer's allowance rule. It's very difficult to work full-time because your full-time obligations are to the person that you're caring for. And my mental health was becoming more and more like a corkscrew. It wasn't the straight line that it should have been. Then came a very bad breakdown, and I lost about 6 months of my life. Can't remember what happened to this day. Can't remember. Complete blank. I know that I went back to Leicester for a period. I was essentially living in the Students' Union building, like Stig of the Dump. And it was very much a reset of where my head was at. And it took a very long while to get my head together. And I worked in a working men's club in Leicester, which was one of the most insightful periods of my life, really, for some of the people that I met there. Sadly, the last time I was in Leicester, I believe it's flats now, which is a shame. After Leicester, well, when I was in Leicester, I'm jumping ahead a bit. I was working in nightclubs. I found myself in promotions, filming content, managing social media accounts, and generally being a nuisance of myself for a couple of quid here and there for promoters and providing video material for people. And I carried on doing that, and eventually led to a job in Soho, working for a sports agency. But that was a difficult job because I was doing the commute from Leicester to London every day. And the lesson I've learned from that is, don't do the commute from Leicester to London every day if you can't afford it. I couldn't at the time, and I was working on around about 4.5 to 3 hours sleep a day to get to do this job. It wasn't easy, and again, my health was suffering because of that. But I persevered. Nightclubs were very much a fallback for me. So I was learning about visuals. I was teaching I was always very big from my time at uni about wanting to teach myself new skills and then apply those skills and learning through application. So I picked up DVD authoring. I was authoring DVDs for people. And that kind of brought me back around to a job at King's College London, working in their Students' Union. Originally starting as a support member of staff for societies more broadly, but they knew about my specialism in student media. And towards the end of the first year there, they made me a full-time student media coordinator there, the first student media coordinator there. So I was able to really channel my passion back from my time working as a student, working in the National Student TV Association, into what I always felt I owed a debt of gratitude towards. And that was a lot of fun. That was a great deal of fun. I left the job there after about 3.5 years. And then it got very messy again. My relationship went Pete-tong, and my stepmom's health was failing. My dad had already passed away 2013, and several years later my stepmom's health was failing. It was cancer in both instances, and I ended up going back to Northampton, coming back round in this cycle of having found stability, then dealing with instability again. And in Northampton I was dealing with how you plan a funeral, these things you don't get taught, and how to clear a house, but also deal with my own issues at the time. And rediscovering a love of making content, shooting photos. And I touched on nightclub work a little bit. And again, through a mutual friend, I got a message to say, Matt, they're hiring at the Evening Standard. You should send a message. So I did. And the woman who became my boss, I sent her a message, had a chat. We knew each other through student TV. So that's one core lesson there. It does pay to network, because that gave me an in. And I just said, look, I'll come in. I'm more than happy to do a trial. And they offered me a trial, and I had a lot of fun. And she came back to me and said, I really want you here full time. So after the trial had finished, I stepped away for about a couple of weeks, no longer than 2 weeks. And then they sent me a contract and said, can you come in? Can you come in full time? And that's how I ended up at the Standard. And the company itself also worked with the Independent. So I was doing 2 jobs at the same time, one for the Evening Standard, one for the Independent. It was about a 60-40 split.
What's one thing that you wish you could do within your job role or just within life itself that you've never really had the opportunity to, but you've always wanted to?
Playing the harpsichord.
What's a harpsichord?
It's a musical instrument.
It's not what I actually expected you to say.
I know, that's why I said it. Always expect someone to provide an unexpected answer there. On a serious note, something I wish I'd taught myself, but never did. The importance of kindness. Actually, I can be very direct and very blunt, and it can be misread as being arrogant. And there have been times when I've been too direct and I've been too blunt, and it causes issues. And I often reflect on things. You actually should. You should always reflect on things you say and do, and the impact it has. The importance of being kind is something that I've learned as I've gotten older, and how being kind isn't a sign of weakness, nor should it be viewed as such, but nor should offering kindness be seen as surrendering principles or a point in a debate or an argument. But I was not kind enough at points where I should have been. And by that, I also mean kind enough to myself. I took a lot on and a lot of responsibility and an awful lot of blame that I put on my own shoulders. I wasn't kind enough to myself on a great deal of things. And that led to a lot of personal problems and a lot of personal issues. So I think the value of kindness and how and when to use it would be my serious answer there, alongside learning the harpsichord.
So I'm going to be a bit geeky here and ask you a bit of a geeky question.
Go ahead.
I want to know what your favourite type of equipment is, or what your favourite equipment is to use.
Samsung S10 Plus. Working on a mobile phone has proven to be an absolute lifesaver. And as I always said to students that I've worked with in the past, and would continue to say to students that I would talk to in the future, the quality and the caliber of equipment that you use is often secondary to the vision and the idea that sits behind it. I was following my guts during the Euros when England was playing Denmark, and I was sat at home and I was watching the game, and I thought, I know the consequences if England win. I know what's going to happen. And previously, when we beat Germany, and I saw the crowd reactions in London when we beat Germany, and I didn't go into London to capture it, I was kicking myself. I should have been there. I should have had my kit with me. I should be in the middle of that. There's that impulse. I want to be in the middle of it. You're not going to see this again. You need to see that. And that's the conversation that always goes through my head. And as I'm watching our game against Denmark, I spent the entirety of the day thinking, okay, I'm just going to prep my equipment and I'm going to leave it there. I'm not committing to going into London, but it's going to be there if I need it, if I think it's worth it. And I'm watching the game. I'm just approaching the end of the first half. And there was something in the back of my mind that just went, you need to go into London. You need to be ready for this. I think England are going to do it. So I went into gear. And again, using my phone, I'm waiting for the bus. I'm watching the game on ITV Hub. I'm keeping track of what's going on, because as I'm going in, I'm planning my route. If England lose, I'll know my immediate way to double back and come back round. No harm, no foul. I can get there and back in about 45 minutes, an hour tops. However, if we're winning, I'm going to be able to keep tabs on performances. Now, if you've not been in central London, getting decent 4G on your phone when everyone's on it can be really difficult. So I've gotten off the bus around Trafalgar Square, and the Eurozone is already built up. So people have got tickets and they're watching it there. And I've got it on my phone. Well, I need somewhere to sit, to stand, so I can watch this and also be ready to run, move if needs be. So this case has a stand on it. So I found a wall about 5 minutes from Haymarket in London, and I just rested the phone on the wall, and I was piggybacking off of the Wi-Fi of a hotel, so I could get the best possible signal that I could to watch the match. And when we'd won, the full-time whistle had gone, I darted it up to Piccadilly Circus. It was about a 5-minute walk, if that. And you could hear the crowds coming out. You could hear them emerging. Now, I've got my camera on me. I was shooting on a DSLR, Nikon D750. All right, okay, I'm ready to run. But as the crowds are coming in towards me, I've not got that flexibility to be able to start shooting on the camera. So I start shooting on my phone. I start shooting video on my phone. I caught them getting on the double-decker bus in the middle of central London. I caught that on video. I caught the photo of them sat on the bus, and it was all done on my phone. The phone has become an absolute godsend for capturing content live, to be able to get into the middle of things and knowing that you've got actually quite decent quality there. So I'd say it would be my phone. Anything else is an absolute bonus. It's an absolute bonus. But give me a decent phone with a decent camera, and it would be an absolute godsend every single time, every day of the week.
You talk about experiences that kind of just fell in your lap. What kind of experience would you say most recently, or kind of your one that you remember most in regards to experience, is the one that sticks in your head?
Press trip that I went to Chile. I'm very, very lucky and incredibly humble that I'm in a role where there are occasions where I can travel and I can see the world, film and shoot. And the press trip that we went to Chile, it was to mark the first direct flight between London and Santiago in Chile. And it was incredible. It was one of those things where content-wise, I've been able to see things that I would never have dreamt of seeing 10 years ago. I was working in the middle of liquid Leicester, seeing people get ridiculously excited about Jason Derulo. They literally only know one song in that town. But to be in a hot air balloon that's flying over the Atacama Desert at sunrise and capturing that on a DSLR, on a GoPro, to be able to swim in a hot spring in the middle of the Atacama Desert, it was insane. That was absolutely insane. And they were paying me to do it. I traveled business class there and back. I was drinking champagne when the plane took off. I remember to this day sitting in liquid, drinking a gin and lemonade for free and thinking, well, this is the life, doesn't get any better than this. If it ended tomorrow, I would remember the trip to Chile, because it's one of those things where you think, wow, I've been able to see this. And of course, there was the incident in Chile where I nearly got trapped under a mountain and got mocked by a load of Chilean school kids. But it just adds colour to the anecdote.
You say if it all ended tomorrow, that'd be your favourite thing. But if you had to dream up your dream situation, what would it be? Because obviously recently I was quite envious of you filming for the Magnum experience. I was quite jealous about that, and especially with the equipment that you use. If you could go anywhere, film anything, what would it be? Who would it be?
I like to shoot a 360 photograph on top of the London Eye. I think a tiny planet photo on top of a pod on top of the London Eye would be nuts. And I'm surprised no one's done it, honestly. I'm absolutely surprised no one's done it. The perspective shot that you'd get from that with a decent 360 camera up there would be insanely good. See, photography is always very central to what I do. And it's always been something that's it's cheap therapy for me to be able to just get a camera, go out with my phone, shoot, and just capture what's going on any given day. In terms of interviews, oh wow. I always wanted to interview John Lewis in America. That man has this seasonal magic about him where he retweets the tweets he gets from people that think they're tweeting to John Lewis the shop. And I believe he ended up giving an interview to the Mail a couple of years ago. He did break his silence and talk to someone. And I always fancied talking to him. There's an old TV host called Ray Cokes who used to host on MTV when it was MTV Europe before it became MTV UK. I wanted to talk to him. He was the inspiration for Chris Evans in his TV heyday. Lots of little things, but if I had to say one experience I would want to do immediately, it would be the 360 on top of the London Eye.
So going back to the hot air balloon, is that the point in your life where you thought, yeah, like I've made it now, like this is it?
I've never thought I've made it. I've never thought I've made it. Never have, never will. There's always things to do, learn, improve. When I was in the hot air balloon, the first thought that went through my head was, why am I here? It wasn't a case of, yes, this is me. I'm in the hot air balloon, done it. There you go. And then flipping the bird to everyone that's doubted me. No, not once, and never would either. Now I can act up to it when I'm around people that will talk about things, but truthfully, it was one of those experiences where you just take it all in and you just realize just how important it is to work hard, to realize that it could end tomorrow. And you've been lucky enough to see these things, to experience these things that many other people never will. They will never see it. And that's something you should always be, as I said, humility is important, as is hard work. When do I think I would ever say I've made it? I honestly couldn't say. I doubt I ever will, to be honest with you. I doubt I ever will. There will always be something I will want to do next. And as long as there's something I want to do next, I will never have made it because I haven't done that yet.
So obviously you have a very heavy set mindset. It's like you're very straightforward. You've got a good moral sort of thing. I want to know what and who inspires you in life.
Oh, very good question. Probably the best questions you've asked so far. No pressure, Taylor. A lot of my family have inspired me, really, in a variety of ways. I've worked a lot off of what my dad had done as a union rep and his work to support people within his work as a trade unionist. And in many respects, it's why I followed suit with the work I do within the National Union of Journalists. I'm often inspired by the people that I've worked with and the people that I've seen develop and grow. I've been lucky to work around a lot of students who have enjoyed incredible careers, and their careers are still flourishing, they're still growing. And it's inspirational to see them go on and achieve what they've done. When you first knew them and you saw they had self-doubt, they had uncertainty, they had confidence issues, they had anxiety issues, they had mental health issues, and you see photos of them being invited to Buckingham Palace, you see photos of them getting married, you see their name on the credits of MCU films, you see them reporting from the Euros finals, and I never ever go, well, I've got a little bit of credit in that. No, I sit back and I always think, I'm pleased I was able to meet you when you thought where you are now was something you could never achieve. A lot of things have happened in my life. A lot of things have caused a lot of turmoil, a lot of heartbreak, and a lot of pain. But the importance of that pain is that it teaches you both about your own capacity to inflict turmoil and pain on other people, but also how that can shape you and how that can forge you into the person that you've become. If I were to do things differently, I wouldn't be the person that I am today. I have my flaws, I have my weaknesses, but I also have my strengths. If I were to do things differently, I wouldn't be who I am on this call with both of you now. So I wouldn't do anything differently. And it's difficult to say that because there were decisions that I've made that saw me lose touch with family. There were decisions that I made that saw relationships end, that saw friendships end. But they've made me who I am, rightly or wrongly. And so if I were to say I were to change who I was, then I wouldn't have learnt the lessons that I have on that journey. Student media has been a part of learning those lessons. If student media wasn't something that I undertook, I don't think I would have learned a lot of the very difficult and a lot of the very hard lessons that I have. I probably would have been academically more successful, I would hope. I might be in a job or a career where I would have been earning money a lot earlier and a lot sooner than I was. I doubt I'd have been happier.
I'll always be intrigued by this. Do you think there has been a time in life where there has been something holding you back where they wish there hasn't been?
Nostalgia has always been something that's held me back in the past, and loyalty to that nostalgia. There have been opportunities where I saw it staring me in the face, but the risk of a comfort zone is it's comfortable by definition. And I never challenged myself when I should have done. And so I ignored the writing on the wall far too many times after uni and didn't see the importance of taking that step into the unknown, taking that risk. And it wasn't until circumstances meant I didn't have that luxury of anything to fall back on. It was a risk or nothing. So really, it was nostalgia when I was at King's, a presumption of value that I thought I had within the organisation and that I held myself by. Wasn't true. It was arrogant. I shouldn't made the call and assumed I was indispensable. I wasn't. And I've always had the issues of learning to temper confidence with reality and learning that you can't be overconfident. You have to have a clearer line where you see that actually confidence and reality don't always meet in the middle. So I'd say there've been a few times where my overconfidence on things has blinded me, really.
I am intrigued to see where you say with this as well. If we were to sit down within a year's time, where do you see yourself in that year's time?
I don't know, and that's the fun part of it, really. I wouldn't have said I would be where I am now 12 months ago. I would hope I'm still in a role where I'm able to make content, where I'm able to produce material, edit, and indulge myself in something I've been doing since university and haven't really stopped. But do I have any vision beyond that? Not really. Well, I do. That's a lie. I do have a vision for it, but it's simply to say that I would hope that I'm still doing what I'm doing, whatever shape that may take in a year's time.
Right, this could be a very controversial question because it can go either ways.
Hit me with it, Tate. Hit me with it.
What is your favourite and least favourite thing about media? Like, what do you love and what do you hate about it?
You could literally write a dissertation on that. Least favourite thing about media right now is misinformation. I've seen it firsthand. I was furloughed during the height of the pandemic, so I was using my time on furlough to follow the development of the movements that we've seen with regards to protesting against the anti-vax protests, the anti-mask marches, the people that are saying they're championing freedom, but they are also spreading a lot of dangerous misinformation. And as last year went on, and I was interested in seeing London empty. That is something I hope I never see again. But also seeing these people spreading these half-truths and these lies about the pandemic. It's the misinformation that's being peddled by some quarters of the media is wrong, and I think it's incredibly dangerous. What I like about the media, there's always something to watch on Netflix. There's choice. We have choice right now, and choice has gotten bigger. And in many ways, choice feeds into what I don't like about the media right now, because choice has led people to be misinformed because they're choosing to be misinformed, because they're seeing information there that misleads them. So choice really sits on both sides to that answer. We have choice right now, choice that we've never had before. I didn't have when I was growing up. And that choice is getting bigger. So you get to see different things, you get to experience different things. And I think the choice that we're seeing, if utilized in the right way, makes that idea of consuming media all the more personal and all the more informative when you have choice that can open up things to you that you've never had before.
I think this one might get a bit controversial as well. How do you feel about cancel culture, Matt?
Cancel culture is really dangerous, but it's valid. See, this is the problem. This is the problem we face. Cancel culture is one of the consequences we see of choice and the empowerment of the individual across the internet, where one person's cause can become viral and people can invest in it. And then suddenly you see a movement to cancel someone, not on the basis of legitimacy, but sometimes just on the basis of tone, of voice, of who shouts the loudest. But the idea of cancel culture and what we're seeing in the wider cultural wars that we're seeing breaking out between the government and certain groups and agencies and media channels as well, it's becoming this very weird, combative battleground where people are being angry and being upset is really, really easy, and it's addictive because being angry online has very little consequence. And we're seeing a move now towards people wanting consequences with what you're saying online, and I don't disagree with that. But then there's wider regulatory and workflow-based issues on how do you implement those consequences? How do you implement those sanctions? Cancel culture is something which is the expression of someone to say, I don't like this, and to justify it and try to validate it. But that doesn't mean that they're always right. But it's important for people to be able to say why they're upset, why they're angry, and why they're annoyed. I don't see where it's going to end up. I don't see an end goal in sight for cancel culture right now. I think in many respects it's only just beginning.
What life lesson made you learn the most?
Life lesson. Ooh. When my mum died, really, not to get all incredibly morbid on this, but when my mum passed away, my stepmom for the record, that was the last member of my family that I was brought up around that passed away. And there was a period of reflection, and I traveled. I went to Spain several times just to get my head clear on things. But you realize, one, just how fleeting life is and how important it is, and how important it is to really chase the opportunities and to chase the enjoyment and the possibility that it brings. But also how when family that you've been brought up around aren't there anymore, to reflect on the choices, decisions, and the words that you said, and both didn't draw from that. And it's painful. It's very, very difficult to do, but to reflect on the things that have and haven't been said, and to learn from it and to develop from it. And as I said, yeah, that's a very difficult journey to go down. But realizing that when you are on your own, in that sense, when family isn't there anymore, to really frame the lessons that you were taught growing up in a different way moving forward, because there is a finality to things. And a lot of people will run away from it. I don't understand why. Mortality is a very scary thing to accept. But there is also an opportunity there to realize that what you say and do leaves a footprint, and what you shoot, what you film, what you edit leaves a footprint. And it led me to understanding that what I do with content can fill that void. And that was really the life lesson that stuck with me the most, is appreciating what you have and to learn from what you had that isn't there anymore.
I apologise on behalf of myself and Tate for the amount of family members that you've lost. I can't imagine what you've been through. But if
well, shut up, Taylor. It's fine. You never killed them.
But if you had to name your autobiography, what would you call it and why?
Sorry, I'm just laughing because that last exchange, I just saw Tate's face. That was an absolute picture. From nightclubs to newsrooms. That's what I would call it, because my work in nightclubs defined me for a long, long while. And for a lot of people, they didn't know what I did for a job. They just knew I was there in a nightclub. If I wasn't filming, I had made visuals for a club. If I hadn't made visuals, I was working on the lights for a club. If I wasn't working on the lights, I was managing social media for a club or a promoter. I was one of those people that you always saw at a venue or at a night, but you never knew what they did. You just knew they were there. And I was known for that, and I didn't mind that. I enjoyed it. It was a fantastic life. It was a fantastic lifestyle, but it wasn't for me. It wasn't something I could make a career out of, and it wasn't something that I could see a long-term future in. Certainly not a secure future. And newsrooms have become something that I've become increasingly synonymous with, where video is something I know I'm good at, and working in a newsroom environment's a hell of a lot of fun. It's a hell of a lot of fun, and I've been fortunate enough to see some fantastic things. One of my favourite stories was after the Theresa May's last election. George Osborne had just been made editor of the Evening Standard, and I was on the early, so I'd been in from about 4 o'clock in the morning ish. George Osborne had just finished his stint on ITV with their election coverage. He comes staggering in. He's tired, not drunk. He slumps in his chair, and I won't swear on this, but he slumps down, throws this quip, and the senior editors in the newsroom all laugh, and I stop and think, I've just seen a former Chancellor of the Exchequer just swear about newly elected government and Prime Minister. I would never in a million years have thought, stood on the door of Zanzibar in Leicester, in about 10, 15 years time, you're going to end up seeing a former very powerful politician slating a former colleague in the middle of a newsroom in central London. So newsrooms are something that I really do see in a completely different light, and they're the two poles that really my life has currently gravitated around. So from nightclubs to newsrooms, nightclub to newsroom seems the obvious title.
Very good title. So obviously your path to your career hasn't been the smoothest ride. You've had a lot of ups and downs and stuff. I want to know what currently motivates you to keep like pushing forward and to keep like going.
I get bored really badly, and there's things I want to do. There's things I want to do. I'm not someone who likes to sit on a sofa and just mope. I don't like that. There are things going out. I've got a lovely bay window here, and there are things going out there right now. And I'm not going to sit back and go, "Ooh, woe is me." No, that's far too easy. And it's dangerous, and it's unhealthy, and it leads to bad habits. You've got to think, what can I do next? What can I challenge myself to do? What can I achieve next? What can I take a risk on? What can I take a punt on? You've got to keep looking ahead. You've got to keep thinking, what can I do tomorrow? What can I do next week? What can I do next month? There's always something to do. So the motivation is to look at what tomorrow's going to bring me. What's going to surface. I'm working later. I might edit a package that's going to fly. There might be something that'll happen. Breaking news in the Olympics. I'll be in the middle of it. I'll be working on the video desk. That's motivation. I'm able to see things in a different perspective by virtue of the fact I'm excited about what is going to happen next. The minute you lose that, you're pretty much surrendering a passion that everyone should really be embracing with both hands. It's not going to come around again.
It really is a great way of thinking, because once you give up, that's it. If it was everything ended tomorrow, it sounds quite morbid, but what legacy would you like to leave behind?
Ask me when I'm dead. If you have a vision about a legacy, then you're kind of looking at life in entirely the wrong way. People remember me as they choose to remember me. I'm not going to tell them what to do. I'll be remembered. If I'm going to be remembered, it'll be by the photographs I take and by the content that I've created. If I've impacted people in any way, I'm not. It sounds callous to say it. I'm not going to preoccupy myself with how people might frame or view me, because that way lies an ego, an arrogance, and a sense of yourself that is conflated. I am who I am. And if I've helped people, if I've supported people, I do so not because I'm looking for gratification. I don't do it because I'm looking to try and make myself feel better. I do it because I want to do it. I will be remembered by the impact that has had on someone. Am I interested in the impact that's had on people? It's not for me to say, never will be. So as I said, ask me when I'm dead.
What is the biggest surprise you've had recently?
I haven't. There isn't a surprise I could mention to you. If I had to say something, I'd say the biggest surprise I've had was seeing them get on top of that London bus when we beat Denmark. I'm never going to see something like that again anytime soon. Seeing that part of London that you associate with such a fast-moving flow of traffic, when you see crowds fill the streets, climbing lampposts, climbing onto a London bus, seeing crowds up there just full of joy, excitement, and energy. That's a surprise. And it's a bigger surprise to think I'm in the middle of this. I'm taking photos. I'm taking video of this. I was buzzing when I got home after I shot that, because you realise I saw that firsthand. I didn't see it through a TV. I didn't see it through a monitor. I saw it firsthand with my own eyes. And things like that surprised me.
So seeing like all those people celebrating and stuff, like obviously it's a big reflection to last year, where obviously we were all inside, we all could go out and whatnot. So it's a kind of sense of freedom that we've got now. What I want to ask is, how did last year and obviously the whole pandemic, how did that cause you any issues, or did it help you in any way?
When it started, I was challenged because there was uncertainty what furlough meant with regards to my job. There was uncertainty with what it meant with regards to my professional future. But I took it upon myself, and it's an opportunity I'm not going to see again. I'm not going to see London Bridge station empty during rush hour. I'm not going to see Oxford Street empty enough that I can hear birds singing. So I took my phone, got on the bus, and I just walked, and I covered a lot of distance over the course of that first lockdown, a hell of a lot of distance. I upset a lot of friends who were wrapped up by the understandable anxiety, panic, and fear that the pandemic caused. And I'm more than acutely aware, and still am, of the consequences of going out into the middle of it. I'm not oblivious to it, nor am I being cocky or not taking precautions and being safe. But you're never going to see something like that again. And I was in a position where I could go and do it, so I did. I went into the middle of it to walk down Knightsbridge and see Harrods with an empty road, quiet. Things like that will never, ever come again in my lifetime, I hope. I sincerely hope. So I just embraced it. It was an opportunity to watch history play out. And that's something where you can sit back and go, I saw that. I have evidence of it. I've produced content for it. And yeah, so I was lucky, and it meant a lot to be able to do that.
I'm going to quickly wrap all this up because it's been very, very insightful, and it's been very, very enjoyable. If you had to give people one kind of a bit of advice, whether it's media related or life related, what would it be?
Never listen to anyone's advice. Never listen to anyone's advice. It's your journey. It's your story. It's your tale. Do it your way. Don't. Other people's advice has worked for them on their journey. It might inform what you do. You might take it, shape it, and use it however you see fit. But their advice should be framed as just that. It's what's worked for them. It may not work for you. So do not take on board people's advice. Don't take on board people's advice as gospel. Don't take on people's advice as a given, as a solution, or a magical formula that will lead to success. It won't. It will be something that illustrates the journey they've taken. And in some senses, the advice that people give you really is just designed to make them feel better, so they feel a sense of accomplishment by giving you advice. Half the time when you actually cross-examine it, it's not worth the paper it's written on. Your journey is your journey. What you go, what you do, inform it with experience. Challenge yourself. You might not get the dream job you want now. That doesn't mean you're not going to get the dream job you want in a year's time, 5 years' time, 10 years' time. You will get it. Have faith, have belief. Belief and faith will go together hand in hand. And don't be arrogant with it. But always remember, when someone like this mug is telling you what to do or offering you advice, I'm doing so because I'm speaking from my point of view. But I'm also telling you what's worked for me will not work for you. So listen, learn, but take your own path. The path I've taken is the path that's worked for me. It won't work for you.